In Chapter 10, we're looking at the first of the 4 different types of industries that we're going to be studying. So this is pure competition. Now, pure competition is not the most common in real life, but it is our best starting point. So in every chapter, in every other type of industry, we're going to learn a little bit more. We're going to start this chapter by looking at the 4 different types of industries. And we'll just introduce them all, and then we're going to have a chapter about each one. Then we're going to specifically be looking at pure competition and the characteristics. Then we're going to look at 2 different approaches to profit maximization. So we'll be talking a lot about profit maximization as we move forward. Remember, that's the goal of every business. So we're going to see how a business that's in a pure competition type of industry would be able to maximize their profit. And there's actually 2 ways that we're going to look at it. The last part of this chapter will be putting together what we've learned about profit maximization in pure competition and how that relates to the supply curve in pure competition. So we're actually going to be building a short-run supply curve for a business in this type of industry. Here's the 4 types of industries we'll be looking at. The first is pure competition, and then we have 3 more that we call imperfect competition. So monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and pure monopoly. Here is an overview of each type. So in pure competition, we have very many both buyers and sellers in pure competition. The product that's offered in pure competition is standardized. That means it's the same product. All of the firms are selling the same product. Pure competition has no control over price. It has very easy entry and exit, so it's very easy for a new firm to pop up in this type of industry. We won't see any other type of competition besides price. And some examples would be agriculture. Also, milk and eggs would fall into this category as well. For monopolistic competition, we still have very many firms. This time, the product, instead of all being the same, will be a little bit different. Each of the firms will sell a little bit different of the same product. They will have very little control over price, but they are able to change the price a little higher, a little lower, depending on what they need. There's still very easy entry and exit into the market. And now we're going to see some other competition besides just price. So there'll be some advertising, some brand names, and some trademarks, and many firms are going to fall into this category of monopolistic competition. So retail, dresses, shoes, where you have many firms and their product they're selling is just a little bit different. If you think about the options that you have as a buyer for shoes, there's lots of different types of shoes that you can buy from many different sellers. Next is oligopoly, and the main point for oligopoly is now there's only a few types of firms. So different oligopolies, they may have standardized products, they may have differentiated products. It doesn't make too much of a difference. It could go either way. In oligopolies, they do have control over price, but they're always going to be paying attention to not only their own price, revenue, and profit, but also what's going on in all the other firms in their industry. We call this interdependence. In oligopolies, there is not easy entry. There's going to be some barriers to entry, so it's very hard to start a business in an oligopoly. That's why there are only a few firms. And we will also see a lot of non-price competition, so we'll also see advertising, brand names, and trademarks in oligopolies. And some examples down here: steel, auto, farm implements, cell phone companies fall into oligopoly as well. And the last type of industry is monopoly, and the main characteristics about monopoly is that there is only one firm, and that firm has the entire market. So they sell a unique type of product, so they don't have any other competition. There aren't any close substitutes to the product that they're selling. They have the most control over price, so they can increase the price, and they have the potential to make the most profit. There are very strong barriers to entry, so no one else is able to start a business in this industry. That's why there's only one firm. And there's not very much non-price competition. They don't have competition, so they don't really need to advertise or have brand names or have trademarks. If they do advertise, it would just be for public relations reasons. And then some examples are local utilities. So in this chapter, we're going to dig deeper into pure competition here. And in the next few chapters, we're going to look at monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly in a lot more detail. So right now, we're just doing a little overview about each one, and we'll dig into each of these separately. But you will need to know all of these characteristics, so it might be handy to keep this slide in a place where you'll be able to see it, because we're going to do 5 chapters. Next 5 chapters are going to be over all of these. And so you will need to know all of these characteristics once we get through the whole 5 chapters. So the rest of this chapter and the next chapter is only going to be about pure competition. So remember what we said, in pure competition, there's a very large number of sellers, and all of the sellers sell exactly the same type of product. So we call this a standardized product. They're also price takers, so make sure you understand what this phrase means. It means that they have no influence on the market price. Whatever the market price is, that's the price that they're going to use to sell their product. Another characteristic in pure competition is free entry and exit. So this just means that it's very easy to enter or exit the market. The key is that if a new business wants to open up in pure competition, it's very easy to do so. So they can jump in, they'll just get a business loan, get set up, and then they can start producing and selling the product. The last characteristic that you need to know about pure competition is what their demand curve looks like. So their demand curve is going to be a horizontal line, which is called perfectly elastic demand. And if you want to actually talk about this back in chapter 6, if you want to flip back to that lecture when we looked at perfectly elastic demand, the idea there is the firms are able to produce a lot or a little, and they're always going to be charging the exact same price. So if they raise the price, they would lose all of their business. And if they lowered their price, they would have way more business than they would be able to handle. So they don't change the price. They're just going to take that market price. They can sell a little or they can sell a lot at exactly that price. So here's the slide that I was talking about. It's in your chapter 6 notes that you had. So the demand curve for one individual firm, if you're a business and you're selling a good in a purely competitive market, then your demand curve would look like this. So it's perfectly horizontal, and you're always going to take whatever the price is in the market, and you'll sell your good at that price. So before we get into the profit maximization, we need to talk about how to calculate revenue. In the last chapter, we went through all the different ways that we can calculate cost, but we didn't talk about revenue yet, and we need both of them to be able to calculate profit. So let's talk about revenue for a second. There's a few different ways we can look at revenue. This one we know already. Total revenue. Revenue is the amount that the business brings in from selling their product. So you just take the price of the product times the quantity that they produced and sold, multiply them together, and you'll get the total revenue that the company receives from selling their product. We can also look at the average revenue, which would be the total revenue divided by how many that they sell. So average revenue actually will always equal price. We'll see how this works when you do the calculations on the next slide. And the most important way that we look at revenue is marginal revenue. So remember, marginal means additional. So it's how much additional revenue does the business receive when they produce and sell one more unit. And here's the formula that you need. Remember, the triangle means change. So marginal revenue is the change in total revenue divided by the change in the quantity. And we've worked with a lot of different marginals so far, so you should be getting the hang of how this works. Remember, if the quantity is just changing by one at a time, which a lot of times that it is, all we have to look at is how much is total revenue increasing by. So the formula is actually easier, and a lot of times we just need to subtract. So total revenue, how much did total revenue increase by when we made one more? So let's do some calculations and see what happens. So it's giving you the quantity that's produced and sold, the price. Notice the price does not change. This only happens in pure competition. If they produce just a little bit, just one, they can sell one at $10. Or if they produce a lot more, if they're producing 5, they can still sell the 5 at $10. So in pure competition, price is always the same. It's not going to change. Calculate total revenue. Remember, that's price times quantity. And you can look at your formulas on the last slide, so you can do this. Average revenue, that's going to be total revenue divided by quantity. And then marginal revenue is how is this total revenue changing when we produce one more? And we're only producing one more at a time. So your marginal revenue, you're just looking to see how much the total revenue is going up. So pause the video here and fill in the table, and then I'll go over the answers. Okay, first things first. Total revenue, you're just going to take the price times the quantity, and for the first one you get 0. So they're not producing and selling anything, so they're not going to bring any revenue in. The next one, price times quantity, is 10. For the second one, now they're producing 2 and selling them for $10 a piece, so 20. And then they're making 3 and selling them for $10 a piece, so 30. Then, if you notice what happened with your average revenue, for each one of these, we're taking the total revenue, we're dividing by the quantity, and we're always going to get 10. So keep that in mind, that average revenue is always equal to price. So notice that the average revenue always ended up being 10, which is exactly equal to the price. This is true in every single industry. So the average revenue will equal price in all of the next 5 chapters. Now let's see what happened with marginal revenue. So marginal revenue is going to be the change in the total revenue. So total revenue went up by $10 divided by the change in quantity. Well, quantity is only changing by 1, so we don't have to worry about dividing by 1. So we're just going to look at total, how much total revenue increased by. So it went up by $10. When they made the second one, then total revenue went up again by $10. Remember, you can take the second total revenue, subtract the first one. So 20 minus 10 would give you your answer. And then here, 30 minus 20, again, went up by 10 and went up by 10 again. So we got that average revenue is always the same, and marginal revenue is also always $10. So marginal revenue is also equal to the price. Now, this is something that I want you to write down in really big letters and then put a big star next to it, because we're going to use this over and over again. And this is only true in pure competition. So in pure competition, marginal revenue is equal to price. Now, what's going to happen in most of the problems that you do in this chapter and the next, they're not going to tell you what marginal revenue is. They're going to say the price of the product is $10. And then in the problem, you need marginal revenue to be able to do the problem. So you must remember that price is always equal to marginal revenue to complete basically any problem in this chapter. So this is the information that's pulled from the textbook, which is basically what we just did. So they're giving you the firm's demand schedule. Notice that the price is always going to be the same, no matter what the quantity is. To get total revenue, we just multiply price times quantity. So this $3.93 here is just the quantity of 3 times the price of $131. To find the marginal revenue, we're just looking at this change in total revenue. So total revenue is increasing by 131 in every row. So marginal revenue is 131 all the way down, which is equal to the price. Okay, marginal revenue is always equal to the price. And now they've graphed it for us. So what I want you to notice here, first of all, our total revenue is increasing, and it's actually increasing in a straight line because it always goes up by exactly the same amount. So we're going to get this total revenue. This is much more important. So we're not going to use the total revenue graph very often, but if you look at this one down here, we have a straight line, a horizontal line right across at the price. So this is at 131. This is the demand curve for the individual firm. It's also equal to the marginal revenue, which is equal to the average revenue. Average revenue doesn't pop up nearly as often. But what you want to know here is they're never going to give you this line. They're going to tell you, so they'll say, price is 131, and then you're going to draw the demand curve or the marginal revenue curve. All you have to do is draw a straight horizontal line right across at 131. And when you're working with a graph, which we're going to be doing quite often in this chapter, remember that this is always your first step. So when you're doing a graph, step 1 is to look at the price. Price is 131. Go to your graph and draw a straight line across right at 131 and label that as, most of the time you're going to be needing the marginal revenue. So demand or marginal revenue. So now we understand our basics of revenue. The next step will be to calculate profit and learn how to maximize profit in pure competition.